Hey folks, how are you doing today? Hope you're having a pretty good week thus far. It's only Tuesday. Just to, hey Nicole, you can see and hear me. Fantastic. She's right in there, right? She knows exactly what I'm going to ask. I love it. Um, so this morning, I wake up between 4:30 and 5. And I was lying in bed, just really still groggy, still waking up. And I was thinking, oh gosh, I gotta get going. Well, at least it's Friday. At least it's Friday. And I thought, is it Friday? No, it's not Friday yet. Well, if it's not Friday, then it's Thursday. Not quite Friday. And it took me a minute to go, no, no. It's Tuesday. Settle down. There's a long week in front of you. There's a lot of work to do. But, it's all right. It's a good week. Ash, great to have you along. Sounds like I'm coming through all right, which is awesome. Not that we're going to be able to take advantage of it today. I think we'll try to take advantage of it on Thursday. But I've upgraded my internet speed. So no more lost frames, dropped frames as they call them, and skipping about. So hopefully it comes in nice and smooth. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We're only going to meet for a few minutes today because we're just really going to introduce the idea of HR, human resource management internationally. And we're going to kind of talk through what it means for your papers, what it means for your assignment. And then we'll get into the deeper detail of it on Thursday. So right now we're just kind of introducing it and getting you set for your papers. So not too much today, nice and short. Here's the thing about international business and HR. It's HR. It's just HR. And I, in fact, teach a whole class on HR, human resource management. It's management 2070 if you want to take it from myself or from Lisa Fowler. She's awesome. So if you're interested, you can take that. But it's certainly nothing that we're going to cover in an hour, right? It's that simple. When it comes to human resource management and international business, it's pretty much the same anywhere, but there are local nuances, right? So just to give you a quick primer on what human resource management is, all right? Well, you got to plan for staffing needs, so you got to do some planning, and then you recruit and hire, and then you train and motivate them, and you evaluate the employees, you compensate your employees with, pay and benefits. There's termination and, repositioning, redeployment, and so forth. And this is just the cycle that goes on and on and on, and it's all part of human resource management. Okay. And you guys have all experienced this. When it comes to HR, though, internationally, it's just different countries do things in different ways. All these aspects of HR are still there, but there are some differences. And you'll want to find out what the differences are for your countries. So, for example, when it comes to, say, organized labor, some countries have a very strong organized labor movement. For example, organized labor in Germany wields a great deal of power. Here we have organized labor, unions, and so forth, but unions are not as strong as they used to be. But in countries such as Germany, as an example, organized labor really, really dominates. In a lot of these socialist democratic countries like Germany and Great Britain and France as well, and Spain, organized labor really, really influences things quite a bit. So that's something you'll want to look at when it comes to staffing for you guys, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Let's talk about compensation here for a moment, right? Here in the US, compensation is pay and benefits. pay and benefits, right? So here at Salt Lake Community College, I receive a salary for my standard classes, but then if I teach some extra classes, I get a little bit of a extra for those hourly. And then I get benefits. I get tuition assistance, so I can take classes like I am tuition free. Still have to pay the fees, but tuition free. And I have health benefits and so forth. That is compensation. And that is a very traditional American compensation package. But different countries do compensation in different ways. So, for example, here, in 2013, CEOs of the 350 Standard & Poor's 500 companies made 330 times more than their employees here in the U.S. So a typical CEO made 331 times more money than their employees. Whereas in Japan, CEOs made about 67 times more than their employees. Japan is much more egalitarian. They're much more community-based. There's this really great documentary I saw one time talking about the CEO of Japan Airlines. And so he's the CEO of the largest airline in the country. And he takes the train to work with everyone else. I mean, and he doesn't have a big, huge, lavish, home. He lives in a modest home. He takes the train in. He has a cubicle like office like everyone else. And so very much a man of the people. Well, in Japan, that's much more normal. More normal. That is normal. Different countries also will pay compensation in different ways. So, for example, here in the U.S., when you got your first job, your parents might have asked, "How much do you make?" All right, that's kind of the hallmark of how valued you are by the company. In Germany, what they'll often ask is, "What kind of car did they give you?" Because part of a compensation package in Germany is often a company car. And Germans really, really love their cars. And oftentimes, the type of car that the company gives you is reflective of the value that they perceive you bring to the company. So you'll kind of need to know, well, how do we pay people? How do they expect to be compensated in these various countries where they do business? It's just not a matter of money and benefits everywhere. Also, how companies gauge success differs from country to country. For example, in India, it's considered poor leadership to include lower strata, social strata people when making, decisions. Now, we talked about this at the beginning of the semester, where in India, there's these social strata in place. And I've actually included a really interesting podcast in, for the supplemental material for that beginning lecture. So if you wanted to go back and look at the culture lectures, you would see that there's a new a podcast there about social strata in India. It's very real. They have a caste system, and that caste system is actually moving over here to the US in many ways because, well, we hire a lot of tech employees from India. So we're kind of seeing their caste system influence us a little bit. But the point here is, to what degree here we really like to include people to some degree and so forth, get collaboration, get the, what's happening on the ground, if you will, get a feel from the people. Whereas India, no, that's not really the case. And that's a different nuance. So when you're building a company in India, you need to understand that who you consult with and who you don't consult with will influence the perception people have of you. This is a difficult thing, and something that needs to be taken into account very, very carefully, especially when it comes to ethics and so forth. Shalice, oh, no problem at all, Shalice. You're all right. You're all right. On with your phone. Fantastic. I'm itty bitty. I'm itty bitty now. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see. Employees are motivated by different things around the world. Not everybody experiences motivation in the same way. For example, motivating employees in high context cultures is different from well, I should have said from a low context culture. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take Asia, for example. If I'm in Asia and I have a team meeting and I say, hey, everybody, before we start, I want to do recognitions. I'd like to call out, Shamal. He's a friend of mine over there. Shamal did this and it was great and fantastic, and I really appreciate Shamal and what he did for the team. The customer was very happy. The boss was very happy. Here's an email that the customer sent. Shamal did A, B, and C. He's great. So everybody, a round of applause for Shamal. Well, here in the US, that's kind of normal, right? That's recognition in front of your peers, and we value recognition in front of our peers. In Asia, though, that would be really shameful. That would cause the person to lose face, because this is a high context culture. They understand that nobody does anything individually. It's all a collective effort. And Shamal would feel like, you know what, you're calling me out as having done this, but all these other people contributed as well, and I don't hear you mentioning them. You're shaming me in front of them. So when we do business in these various cultures, we need to understand what is motivating to them, all right? And how are we going to motivate them to meet our goals? Recruiting is done differently in different countries. So for example, and not that any of us is going to be, Samsung in South Korea, but in order to work for Samsung is seen as the big, amazing employer in South Korea. By the way, I apologize. One of the reasons today is going to be short is I'm losing my voice. So in order just to get an interview with Samsung, not to get a job, just to get an interview, you have to take what is essentially kind of an SAT test. And it's only offered like maybe 4 times a year. I don't know exactly. I ought to find out how many times a year is this test provided in South Korea. So if you want to just be eligible to interview and be hired by Samsung, you have to pass this test. And it's a heinous test. I mean, it's not just this sort of little personality thing, No, this is a full-on major exam. And so people will actually study for months and take classes just to get the information they need to pass the test. All right, well, how is recruiting done in the country where you're doing business? You can't just assume that everybody recruits the same. Now, those are just examples, all right? And like I say, we are not going to go into depth. But what we are going to talk about today is, kind of thinking just in general about staffing for your papers, okay? And to do that, we're going to talk about geocentric, polycentric, and ethnocentric points of view when it comes to staffing. I had to kind of remind myself what the words were, right? Now, we have talked about these before. We talked about these a few months ago when it came to just general views of staffing and organization. But I want to revisit these with your papers in mind. So, as we go about looking at these, I want you to think about what are the staffing needs for your business. So, for example, if we're doing, okay, so if we're doing our app, there we go, the health app, right? Do you need a staff for that? Do you need marketing? Do you need sales? Do you need a staff? I don't know that you do, except here in the United States, right, where you're doing the programming and so forth, but I don't think you need a global staff. Same thing with the book, right? I don't know that you need a global staff. On the other hand, do you need a global staff when it comes to your boxes, the boxes hanging in the apartments and so forth? Do you need somebody over there who knows the lay of the land, or are you going to do it? In other words, somebody has to get this off the ground in Singapore, the US, or South Africa, wherever you're going, Mexico, wherever you're going to be doing business. How are you going to get this off the ground? Now, if the way you're going to do this is you doing it, okay, you doing it, maybe you go out there and get this done, then what you're looking at here is an ethnocentric approach, okay? And that means that a company fills all the key management positions with parent company nationals. Well, what do I mean, parent company nationals? Well, you're the parent company and you are from the country where you're from. So you are from the country where your parent company is located. You are a parent company national. So why do this? Well, there are some real pros for you. You have a skills gap in that country. You don't have anyone there, so you get on a plane and you fly out there. You can now do the job that needs to be done. You don't have anybody in that country, presumably. I'm just saying if this is the case, then that's going to be the way you're going to want to go. You can therefore take your competencies over there. And of course, you're going to have a unified corporate culture because you're a corporate culture of one, right? On the other hand, here's something you need to bear in mind. Let's say you're American. I'm going to say, I know that some of you are from the US, others are from Mexico, some other countries. Let's say America for just a moment. Well, there's the ugly American syndrome, right? You're going to get on an airplane, fly to South Africa, and promote the book, right? Or you're going to fly to Singapore and promote the boxes, right? Well, yeah, but you're an American. Now, in the case of, say, the book, you're the celebrity, right? Shalise, you're the celebrity, you're the author. And so that kind of comes with some level of cult of personality. But when it comes to promoting an app or these boxes, there might be some sort of outsider aspect to it. And so that's what I mean by kind of resentment of the host country. On the other hand, this is really straightforward. If you're a company of one person, this is your approach. Well, let's say that you go, well, actually what I'd really like to do is find someone out there to help me launch it in this country. Find somebody in South Africa to help launch it. Find somebody in Thailand. Well, no, you bring it here to the US. Or find somebody in Singapore to launch it, right? The Grow Box's partner country is in India. Would it be better to send an India employee from there? Alma, hold on to that because you're the next slide. Everybody hold on to Alma's. But in the case of Alma, if she's doing boxes in Singapore and she hires somebody in Singapore, then what we've got is the polycentric approach. Polycentric approach says a company requires that host company nationals manage the subsidiaries while parent companies occupy key positions at headquarters. In other words, let's take Shalise, for example. Let's just for the example, because Alma, I want to use you as the example for the geocentric. Let's use Shalise for the polycentric. Let's say that she finds somebody in South Africa who can help launch and promote her book, her seminars, her channel, her YouTube channel, her podcast, and so on and so forth. So that means, and she's going to come out every now and again to be, the star, but she needs somebody over there to kind of keep the business running. Let's just say, for example, well, she's going to be polycentric because she's the parent company, so she's going to run headquarters here in the U.S., but what she has over there is kind of a subsidiary in South Africa, which is, Shalise South Africa Corporate, right? Or LLC. And so that way, that person is over there kind of, pressing palm and schmoozing and getting things going, while Shalise is over here in the U.S. continuing to build the company. Now, she and this person over in South Africa would work really, really, really closely together. And she would go out frequently to promote it and to be the star and to manage this place and so forth. But she's got two people running the company, herself in the national country in the US, and then this person in South Africa kind of running the subsidiary, if you will. Well, why do this? Well, one is, hey, it's easier for a South African to sell a product to South Africans than for an American to sell to South Africans, right? They know them. They know the culture. They know what people need. They know how the customer thinks and so forth. And furthermore, this is relatively inexpensive. You go ahead and go out there every once in a while and you are able to do that, but you don't need to live out there. You don't need to go out there constantly because you have this other person out there. So it's not bad. Now, there are some cons. One is this person over here in South Africa would never have the opportunity to become Shalise, right? They are always the South African, runner of the company. They'll never have the opportunity to rise to the level of one day running the whole company because Shalise is the company. On the other hand, if that person has the opportunity to grow to other countries and so on and so forth, that might be all right. But basically, they're limited in how high they can grow in the company. Okay. There's a chance that they're going to feel a little bit isolated. Yes, they're running the company there in South Africa. They're promoting the YouTube channel, the book, and the podcasts, and they're maybe lining up some seminars, and Shalise comes out every 3 months to run a workshop or something. But, they're not going to be in an office. They're not going to be meeting with Shalise daily. They're going to feel a little lonely and isolated, right? While Shalise is over here doing her videos, doing her podcasts, interviewing people, rubbing shoulders, and all this sort of, and the person in South Africa is going to be like, I don't know any of those people. I don't feel connected to the product anymore. So there's a real risk there. Okay. Your third approach is the geocentric approach. So for the geocentric approach, I'd like to use ALMA as the example. This is where a company simply seeks the best way to fill key positions across the entire organization, regardless of nationality. So ALMA says, well, heck, this is great. I'm in the US. I want to sell in Singapore, but I'm selling an Indian product in Singapore. So I have three options. ETHNOCENTRIC says, I go to Singapore and more or less live there to get this up and running. GEOCENTRIC says, no, I find somebody in Singapore who can do this for me. I mean, or the POLYCENTRIC, I apologize, the POLYCENTRIC. The GEOCENTRIC says, well, no, it's a Indian product. It would probably make more sense to find somebody in India close to the product who's interested in supporting me as I go to Singapore to sell this thing. And it's just the right people at the right place at the right time with the right skills, regardless of nationality. That is a much more geocentric approach. So yes, Alma, that might very well make good sense for you, right? So now there are pros to this, right? You're using human resources efficiently and so on and so forth. You know, it can be expensive to implement because you're moving a lot of people around and so forth. But for this small example, not so bad. You do need to worry about immigration issues because, well, all right, what is involved in somebody from India going to Singapore to work for, say, a month? Can they do that? Is that allowed? Now, it's really tempting to say yes, and by the way, the answer is yes, okay? But you can't assume that. So, for example, when I was with Intel, okay, Intel is an American company, but we have a huge presence in Malaysia and Israel, okay? So what? Well, here's the so what. Israel does not recognize Malaysia as a country, and Malaysia does not recognize Israel. Neither one recognize the other as countries. They do not have diplomatic ties. You are not allowed to travel. If you're Israeli, you're not allowed to travel to Malaysia. If you're Malaysian, you're not allowed to travel to Israel. Well, then how do we make this work in Intel? Well, we have them travel somewhere else together. So we would often meet in Singapore. So folks in Malaysia would go to Singapore, hop, skip, and a jump away. And then folks in Israel would go to Singapore, and we would go to Singapore, so we'd have big meetings there, right? So you need to know, if you're going to run this geocentric approach, you need to know who's allowed to travel where and to work, okay? But they're all good options for a company. I want to be clear. Normally, like when we first talked about this at the beginning, we kind of put this in a context of ethnocentric bad, polycentric better, geocentric best. But when it comes to starting a venture like you folks are, don't think about bad, better, best. Think about what makes the most sense to get this thing off the ground. So, for example, I consider myself a global citizen. So I love the geocentric approach. I advocate for the geocentric approach everywhere I can because I don't like the ugly American idea at all. However, if I were trying to launch my consulting business in France, yeah, I would use the ethnocentric approach. I would go to France and I would try to get that up off the ground. The French are not super keen on Americans right now. I understand this. I used to live there. But I really wouldn't be able to afford to do anything else. Maybe while I'm out there, I could find somebody in France, some guy or gal who could help support this. So then I could go to a polycentric approach. But I would definitely start with the ethnocentric. Okay? So what you need to do for your papers is you need to just understand, how are you going to staff the launch? Now, none of you are saying, I'm going to build this big, huge multinational corporation in 1 week and I need to staff it with 87 people, right? No. None of you are saying that. Most of you are starting fairly small. That being said, even fairly small requires at least one person. How are you going to start this, and where are you going to take it, right? By the way, in the case of budget, just presume that you have a basic, simple budget. Don't presume that you have $14 million, right? But you're allowed to presume that you have $10,000. And with $10,000, you could probably get something off the ground. So go ahead and give yourself a $10,000 budget to sort of work with, unless you feel that you legitimately have more. If you legitimately have more of a budget, then go ahead and make that case. But you're allowed to give yourself a hypothetical for this paper, okay? So go ahead and give yourself a $10,000 bonus and tell me how you would spend it on airfare and staffing for this thing, okay? So that's all we're going to talk about today, and I'll get this question here in a moment here, Nicole. When we come back on Thursday, we're going to talk about, once you're there with your staff, whether it's you or somebody that you hired or somebody you brought in from another country to work there, how to make sure they're successful. That's what we're going to talk about on Thursday. Nicole, so where am I using an existing bakery and licensing the receipt? How would you address this? You're the staff. You're here in the U.S., so you've got an ethnocentric approach, but that's really nice and straightforward because you really don't need to hire any. Now, when you go to Thailand, and I apologize, I think it's Taiwan. When you go to Taiwan and negotiate this license and so forth, are you going to do it alone? Or are you going to hire somebody, even temporary contract work in Taiwan, to help you negotiate the license? My guess is what you would do is you would go to Taiwan. Well, first you would find somebody in Taiwan who has experience negotiating licenses. You would fly to Taiwan, meet up with this person, strategize, go in, negotiate for the license, and make all that happen. That is a polycentric approach because you're using somebody over there who knows the lay of the land, and you might even keep them on hand over there for other reasons. So that's more of a polycentric approach. Does that help you, Nicole? Let me know if that helped you. And Alma, yeah, it's my pleasure to give you a raise. $10,000, not bad. Okay. So, any other questions? Let me know. Nicole, good. Thank you. I'm glad that worked out. If you have any other questions or comments or concerns, go ahead and throw them into the chat there. Otherwise, we are all set. And when we come back on Thursday, we'll talk about how to be successful in these countries when you're there actually working or hiring people there. Okay? So until then, have a great day, and we'll see you then.